attached to Shaky Shivers for a bit before you actually started filming. What was it about this initial project that attracted you to it?
I I loved the script. I thought it was really, really funny. I sat down and read the script and actually laughed out loud, which is always a good sign. And I've always been a big fan of those types of horror movies. And this is, as you know, a love letter to the classic 80s monster horror movies and all those like nostalgic
Yeah.
horror movies that we love from that time. And I grew up watching those, so that I was really drawn to that, obviously. Yeah.
Part of your preparation for this role, you did a deep dive into the werewolf canon, and historically, these roles have been more male dominated. How rewarding has it been for you to bring a different perspective to such a horror slash supernatural staple?
Yeah, I was really excited to join the werewolf canon. Um, I've said it before, I think I've seen every werewolf transformation known to mankind now. Like I really did a deep dive into the werewolf lore and all of that stuff. And before this film, I loved learning about that kind of stuff anyways, like where, real life monsters come from. And I listened to a podcast about that. So I mean, as far as it being like a horror comedy and a comedy, very silly comedy more than anything, I took it very seriously, seriously, but I had fun. Yeah, and it's not portrayed by women very much, and I don't know why. And so we worked with this before we started shooting. We worked with this amazing movement coach
Mhm.
because all of us had to turn into these monsters. And even though they're silly, Sung really wanted us to be able to fully embody them. And so we worked with this woman. She was so brilliant. And I remember her and I talking about like the moon and the cycles of the moon and what that also means to be a woman. And so, yeah, it definitely started from the inside out. And then also the outside in because we were working with Gabe Bartalis, who just like is, in my opinion, the star of the movie. So yeah.
Perfect segue to this next question, but like you were saying, you worked with a movement coach as part of your preparation for this role and studied a lot of different werewolf transformations. How did that physicality allow you to tap into your character further, and how did you make this transformation unique in your own?
When we were talking about what actually happens when your body is transforming into another being, another entity, like your bones are literally breaking and snapping and reforming, and how painful that would be. Um, and then when I was doing it and kind of exploring that and doing the performance, it felt very like deep and like guttural. And so I feel that really lent itself to the performance as well. Any actor is going to have a unique take on anything if you're just
Mm,
authentically like, approaching your work as you. And so I think just because it was me approaching it, it therefore would be authentic. But I think, I don't know, I think making it my own, but I also like, I love American Werewolf in London. So I also was like thinking of that. And I love that movie and that transformation. So I did make it authentically my own, but I definitely pulled from all the classics and stuff. But I think maybe emotionally, um, doing that part and emotionally, I guess that was where it was the most authentic and kind of how it felt inside of me doing this in the context of the movie of Shaky Shivers, which is also very silly. Like it's not
yeah.
that's maybe that's the other thing that makes it a little bit more authentic. Like it's not super scary. Like the monsters themselves are also kind of funny and it's so yeah, I think that's part of it too. Maybe that's what part of it made it authentic. 'Cause this is like definitely a comedy.
Yeah.
It's not a scary werewolf transformation. So that
You
too.
know,
Yeah.
yeah. And, since the last time we spoke, you also started writing and producing. How has your work behind the scenes impacted the way that you approach your work on camera and interpret characters like Lucy?
Oh, yes. Yes, I have been writing a lot. I just directed my first short as well
Oh,
this
cool.
year. So I tried on that hat and oh, I just loved it so much. I really enjoyed that the process of writing and then also directing. I think, yeah, I think you just gain a whole new perspective when you step into another like aspect of the industry. I've always been a big fan of, I'm a big reader, and I love scripts and books and all that stuff. So I've always, writing seemed like something I always kind of fell into anyways. But directing, yeah, understanding at least what I went through as a director and directing actors, I think it, it yeah, it just expanded this whole new respect for like the process as a whole, like it really does take an army, and every single person on set, the actors and crew, no matter who it's all very important. Like it really is like a family, and takes a whole team to accomplish something. So I think
Yeah.
that really, like, because as an actor, you can feel a bit isolated sometimes from the process and as like a bigger picture, and you're there, you come in at the end of kind of this whole pre-production that's been happening like a long time before you entered the project, and and you don't see a lot of that, and then post you don't see a lot of, unless you come in and do some ADR. So I think getting a actual hands-on perspective of like where it actually, like the piece like births itself, and then seeing it to the end, I'd never experienced that before, so it just gave me a whole new appreciation and perspective.
Great answer. We have to sync up again when the short comes out. And you and Vivi have such a fantastic chemistry on screen. You really believe that Lucy and Karen are best friends. How did you both build that bond while filming during the pandemic?
I honestly think it was one of those special things that just happened. Vivi and I we share a really amazing mutual friend. So we had met prior, just very briefly, at like a theater thing. And then when she did the chemistry read, we were like, oh my gosh, like, Lindsay and I know Lindsay. Shout out Lindsay. Like, and so we were already bonded by a mutual friend, which I think, helps in those situations. And yeah, and then when we got on set, there is one story that I think actually, in my opinion, solidified our friendship, because we're still good friends. We arrived at the location we were shooting Shaky Shivers at, primarily in this area called Fraser Park, which is about, I think, about an hour and a half north of LA. And it's this little like town that everyone has a cabin, and there's bear warning signs everywhere, and you get the idea. And we were staying in our little cabin, Vivi and I, and we arrive and we're like, okay, here we are, wow. And there was no Wi-Fi,
Mm,
which, if I was there to unplug and kind of just relax, that would be absolutely amazing. But we were like, oh no, like, how are we going to know if what our call time is, or if like the schedule's changing or whatever? So we also had absolutely no reception, cell reception at all, because we were in the middle of nowhere. So it was dark, and we were like, well, let's just drive to until we get reception. We'll just like go on this main road, which is not a main road. It's still like a back road lined with like trees and who else knows what. And so we did that, like went on this, like, the start of like filming. Even before we started filming, we like set off on this adventure together, and like found ourselves pulled over, and like then there was like a weird guy there, and it all turned into like we actually, after the fact, when we stopped like kind of being scared or whatever, being in the middle of the woods alone, I was like, I think we just like essentially did the first scene of the movie in real life.
mm,
So I
yeah.
think that moment, I don't know, it just happened, and that moment really like solidified it. So yeah.
Love that. And Lucy and Karen are characters who are equally unhinged. How much of that is scripted versus improvised? And do you have a favorite one-liner of Lucy's?
Of Lucy's, I mean, yeah, we were able to play a lot. So our writers were brilliant. Sung was obviously, of course, and let us play and improv a lot. Favorite line, favorite one-liner. Um, I don't, this isn't a line, but I like when when Karen turns into, I don't know, I guess spoiler alert, like turns into a zombie.
Yeah.
Um, that I feel like tonally, I mean, it's already set up, but the movie really becomes aware of itself at that moment, and Lucy escapes from kind of the like dorm room situation that we're in, and she does this kind of like leap that like it's so silly and didn't need to happen, but I think that's one of my favorite moments. Yeah.
Yeah. You've
That's
also worked.
totally, we totally stole that. I mean, I totally stole that from Werewolf in London. So a lot of like, you know, moments that we wanted to pay homage to. So yeah.
Mm, love that. And you've also worked on projects of all sizes. What is it about independent filmmaking that excites you as a creative and a storyteller?
That's a good question. I think there's a freedom to it. Obviously, you know, you're going to be working on with less money, so there's a lower budget, but everyone's there. I mean, I can especially speak to Shaky. Everyone was there because they loved it.
Mm.
They loved these types of movies, and it I feel like there's a more family aspect. There's a tighter bond, a more, yeah, it feels more family like when you're working on these smaller movies, and you really do get to play and explore and kind of, because you don't have somebody at the top kind of pressing you for time or for money. And not that, you know, time and money isn't a thing when you're shooting like an indie either, but there isn't as much of an overhead presence. Um, and it feels a little bit more free and collaborative, I would say.
And this is also Sung's directorial debut. It's a filming experience different when the person directing also has experience in front of the camera. Is there a different shorthand that's developed? What was that collaboration like?
Yeah, definitely. I think Sung's definitely an actor's director, and you know,
Mm.
he's walked so many miles in our shoes. You know, it feels like any situation that maybe we were experiencing on set, he knew immediately because he had already experienced it himself, and kind of knows what it feels like when, you know, if you're feeling extra vulnerable that day or something like that. Yeah, there was definitely a shorthand and a an understanding for sure. Yeah.
I got one final question for you. You've already done so much already in your career. What's left on your bucket list? And is there anything you can tease about that short that you wrote and directed?
Oh my gosh. Oh my God, I have so many things on my bucket list. What do I want to do? I want to do so many things. I think you know, what I am excited, the stories I'm excited about right now are stories that are maybe a little bit more well, obviously, you know, like three-dimensional characters and characters that are really fighting or going through something is always the overarching like goal. But I want to experience like living in a world like living doing like a like post-apocalyptic like
Mm.
situation, or something that's set in like the past, or like, you know, some like the 70s or something like that, something that isn't like super modern. Is I think I want to live in a different world right now in the next project. And then yeah, the short I directed, it's called Sis. It's a very personal story of mine, about a really important time in my recent life and a conversation that came out of that experience that I had with my real life sister, that then inspired this movie. That's a bit vague, but yeah.